Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulil Kareem Ma'bad. So, inshallah, we're going to go ahead and get started with our next session. The session is titled Resolving the Conflict Between Medicine and Theology. When does medicinal practice contravene Islamic beliefs? And our speaker today is none other than the esteemed Sheikh Yasir Qadhi. As you may know, and he doesn't really need a lengthy introduction, but he is the chair of the Islamic Fiqh Council, and he is obviously has many accolades to his name, but I'm not going to belabor all of that. I'm going to go ahead and have him come up and benefit us with the topic at hand. تفضل شيخ.
بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه ما بعد. So my paper actually has been uploaded to the Google Drive. So please log on to the Google Drive that AMJA has sent, and you'll be able to read the entire paper. It is not printed in the book, but you will have the PDF, inshallah, from the Google Drive. So I'm going to very quickly summarize the salient features, and then inshallah we can have a Q&A. My talk today will center around a number of points. Let us begin with the issue of medicine in the Sharia. We're all aware that the default ruling is that medicine is mubah. Some have said mustahab. One of the Hanbali positions is that it is makruh based upon theological grounds. However, no mainstream scholar has ever said that medicinal practices as a default are haram. As well, one important takeaway that many of us, especially beginning tulab al-ilm and many of the awam, they misunderstand, there is no mainstream school that says medicine is wajib. There is a minority position in the Shafi'i school that occasionally, with a long list of conditions, it becomes wajib. But we need to be careful as tulab al-ilm. We don't believe, like many people outside of our faith tradition, that we have to do everything to save the patient. On the contrary, the patient can opt in and opt out. It is not obligatory for the patient to avail himself or herself to medicinal practices. It is permissible, and some might say mustahab, but under no circumstance as a default is the availing oneself to medicinal practices obligatory. The Sharia does not require us to try to prolong life at any cost possible. No, you have the option as a sick person. If you don't want to do the treatment, then it's up to you. You don't have to do the treatment. So we have to keep this key point in mind. Now, the two main ahadith for our purposes, because my topic is dealing with permissibility of medicinal paradigms, the two key ahadith for us is the hadith of Abu Darda and the hadith of Auf ibn Malik. As for Abu Darda, the Prophet ﷺ said, فَتَدَاوَوا يَا عِبَادَ اللَّهِ وَلَا تَتَدَاوَوا بِالْحَرَامِ. Right? So take medicines, but don't take that which is haram. So this has to do with something that might be haram, a substance that is haram. This deals with another topic not related to me, and that is, when does taking of a haram become permissible, under what circumstances? That's a separate topic altogether. For me in particular, the hadith of Auf ibn Malik is what is of paramount importance for my presentation, and that is the famous hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ said, اعرضوا علي رقاكم, show me your ruqa, فإنه لا بأس بالرقى. There's no problem in any ruqya as long as there's no shirk in it, right? Now, what is important from both of these ahadith, right? We get an understanding, and that is that the Prophet ﷺ is telling others to derive medicines, and he is saying, as long as there's nothing haram, as long as there's nothing shirk, it is okay. So from this we glean that the primary sources for medicinal practices are typically supra-religious, i.e., the Quran was not revealed to teach medicine. So where will medicine come from? From the tajarib, from the experiences of people. It is not the job of the faqih to become a medical doctor because of his fiqh training. If there's an exception like Shaykh Hatim al-Hajj, that is the exception. He is a faqih and a doctor, two separate trainings done. The faqih as a faqih, it is not his job to take on medicinal advice. Rather, his job is to sift the haram from the halal based upon the criterion that we are learning today. And therefore, the default is that all paradigms are halal as is the general case of all other aspects, the default is hil. There are two main issues that would make a medicine haram. Number one is the substance is haram. That's the hadith of Abu Darda. And number two, there's something that is shirki. There's something that is theologically problematic. That's the hadith of Auf ibn Malik. That's going to be my topic for today. But very quickly, before we get to the actual topic, I wanted to very quickly go into the notion of the prophetic medicine. And just to point out that there are two primary opinions well known in our tradition regarding at-tib al-nabawi. Of course, you do have a dominant position. There's no doubt about that. It is a mainstream and a dominant position that at-tib al-nabawi is tashri'i in nature, i.e., as Ibn al-Qayyim himself says, that it is the highest type of medicine. And that's fine, and that is a majority opinion, and so many ulama have held it. Just be aware that there is another opinion as well, and this is the position of Al-Qadi Iyad, Ibn Khaldun, Shaykh Waliyullah Dihlawi. In our times, Shaykh Umar Sulaiman al-Ashqar, who has his PhD on Af'al al-Rasul, he's actually written a number of treatises. Even in his book, he talks about this, and others beyond them. This list is not exhaustive in the paper, but from their perspective, the entire genre of Tibb al-Nabawi is not tashri'i. It is not something that is legislative. It is tajarubi. It is experiential. And hence, when the Prophet ﷺ is telling you medicinal advice, he is speaking as a human being of his time and place. And therefore, it is not something that is binding upon the rest of the ummah. So just be aware there are two opinions out there. Feel free to choose whichever one you think is more conducive to your own views in this regard. Now, from our perspective, I felt it very relevant to very quickly go over in my paper. I spent 5-6 pages, Islamic or Islamicate medicine. And the reason for this is that we have to be consistent. If we're going to make something haram that we find strange in our time and place, let us make sure that the same illah should not be retroactively applied, and then we find out that the bulk of Islamic medicine is also haram. So I went into a brief tangent about what exactly is Islamic medicine. What did Ibn Sina, who is without a doubt the greatest doctor of all of human history pre-modernity, Avicenna, as you know, really has a key place in the history of medicine. Ibn Sina is actually coming from a long tradition before him. And in particular, Hippocrates and Galen. Hippocrates is ancient times, Galen is post-Jesus Christ, but they're both Greek pagans. They're both people who had their own ideologies and theologies. Hippocrates and Galen were both key in defining a paradigm of medicine that Ibn Sina adopted. Ibn Sina took this paradigm. It is now called the Unani paradigm, or in our Indian Pakistani tradition, it's called the Hakim medicine, Hakim tradition, right? This is the Hakim or the Unani tradition. And it is completely disconnected from modern medicine. It is a separate philosophy of medicine. And this philosophy relies upon a number of key usul paradigms that they have. Most importantly, the theory of the four humors. I'm not going to go into it, but they divided the world into, quadruples, 4 different things. There's air, earth, fire, and water. There's 4 elements, there's 4 humors. So for them, everything was in 4s. And they felt that when all of these 4 aspects are in perfect harmony, there is beauty in the air, there is health in the body, there is, no civil war on society. And they felt if one of these humors is tempered with, if one goes more than it should, that is where problems occur, disease occurs, civil war occurs. So the point was to balance the 4 humors. Another key concept of their understanding of medicine is something called pneuma, And pneuma is like a force, a life force that permeates throughout all living entities. This is a cornerstone of Greek theology and of Greek paganism. In fact, Zeus represents the source of pneuma, the ultimate pneuma. And every single ruh inside of a person is a manifestation of that pneuma, or a partial connection with that pneuma. So for them, the pneuma has to be, again, in sync and in harmony with itself and with the 4 humors. And they also had other aspects, the miasma, we're not going to go there, it's in my paper, the 4 temperaments. They had their own notions of anatomy and physiology, which are different from what we now know. Again, pre-modernity, pre-Renaissance, there was a different understanding of the functionality of each organ. So Ibn Sina is taking a lot, dare I say, maybe 80-85% of these usul from Galen and before him from Hippocrates, and then Ibn Sina is simply adding extra tajarub, extra experiences. Also, they had a very developed pulse theory, which is again very different from what we have. Now, to be factual, I'm just being factual here. Modern medicine, the types of medicine that we go to the doctor for, we go to the hospitals for, modern medicine has moved on from these theories. That's a polite way of saying they don't view these theories as being valid. They're antiquated, they're outdated. Nobody in the modern medicine paradigm actually believes in the four humors anymore. It is, from their perspective, just antiquated figments of the imagination. Nobody in the modern medical field, the modern doctors we go to, actually believes in something called pneuma. Nobody believes in miasma. This is all something that was just, tilka ummatun qad khalat, and it is all moved on. Of course, this tradition is still alive, as we said, in the Yunani or in the Hakim tradition. And by the way, there's over 15 such paradigms. You have the conventional or Western medicine called allopathic medicine. You have the Unani medicine. You have Ayurvedic medicine, which is in India, the Hindus. You have traditional Chinese medicine. You have traditional Japanese medicine. You have Tibetan. You have energy medicines, homeopathy, naturopathic, chiropractic, traditional African, Siddha in areas of India, and Native American, and even more. So I have like 15 that I quickly went over. So we in this country and in the Western world, and basically modernity, we are primarily familiar with what is called allopathic. It's an antiquated term. It's also called evidence-based or scientific medicine. This is the medicine all around us, the doctors, the hospitals. This is the default paradigm of the world. As I said, there's at least 15 other philosophies and paradigms. These philosophies and paradigms, by and large, are stemming from usul, totally disconnected from our Western-based, scientific-based medicine. And again, the most important is the Unani or the Hakim tradition. But there are others besides these. So, for example, one of the systems of medicine is acupuncture. And acupuncture comes under traditional Chinese medicine. It is one of the madhahib of traditional Chinese medicine. And traditional Chinese medicine, it had a different understanding of the world. Just like ancient Greeks had a different understanding, the Chinese had something called qi. It's spelled Qi, it's pronounced qi. Qi. And qi is the exact same concept as the Greek pneuma. So these ideas were floating around antiquity. And the Greeks took them and they developed a theory and they called it pneuma. And the Chinese took them and they developed a theory and they called it qi. It's the same reality, but obviously it's manifested differently in different cultures. And again, for the Chinese traditional medicines, there is this notion that there is a life force, a qi, that is permeating throughout the entire body, and that the body has specific pathways, they called meridians, and that the point is that you need to maximize the qi or to balance the qi. How do you do that? You poke a hole, a needle, to quite literally release qi or to concentrate qi, according to their sophisticated schools of what they're doing. You poke a hole in a particular place, and that's going to, block or is going to allow or encourage the balancing of the life force. So this is the reality of acupuncture. It is based upon the antiquated notion of something called qi. Now, the concept of qi is also found in all Taoist religions. So the ancient Chinese religions that are called Taoism, Buddhism, there is this notion of qi. But the acupuncture school of medicine, in and of itself, is not connected to the theology of Taoism. It is based upon a usul that has also been adopted by the Taoist religion, but acupuncture is distinct from theology. Acupuncture has nothing to do with Taoism. They took a concept which is general in the entire globe at the time. There is this energy called qi. If you were to speak to maybe a temple priest, where did qi come from? He might say some of the gods did it or whatnot. Just like the ancient Greeks linked pneuma to Zeus. But by the time Galen comes along, Galen is not a theologian, and Galen is not caring about Zeus in the books he's writing. And so he takes pneuma and he develops an entire theory of medicine based upon pneuma, and it has nothing to do with ancient Greek paganism. Similarly, you have this notion of acupuncture, in which you have a concept of qi. The people who practice acupuncture are of all different types. You have agnostics and atheists, you have Buddhists, you have Hindus, you have Muslims. Many Muslims practice acupuncture. As a philosophy of medicine, it has become completely disconnected from its origins. The same goes for other systems as well. I wanted to bring in homeopathic, even though it doesn't come under Chinese, but it is a very interesting case study. And that is that homeopathic medicine, and again, I don't want to ruffle any feathers here, but to be brutally honest, it is considered to be quack medicine by every single serious scientist and researcher in modern times. And if you study the science behind homeopathy, what homeopaths believe is that you take a tincture, you take an extraction from a particular plant, a particular animal that is supposed to cause the same symptoms that you're trying to cure. So the notion is like cures like. So something that should harm you, something that should cause a problem, according to homeopathy, if you dilute it, is going to be the solution. So what they do is they take an extract from a plant and animal, and then they dilute it to an astronomical amount. And the final product is so diluted that scientifically there's hardly any molecules of the original left in that particular final product. And if you read my paper or you watch a Google video, YouTube video, you'll understand. They take one drop of the original and they add it to 100%, so 1 out of 99. Then they take that and they take one drop to another to get the second, then the third, then the fourth. On average, homeopathy starts at 10C or 7C or 15C. So you're 15 times taking one drop of water, putting it in a big bottle. Then you take one drop from that big bottle, put it into another. You take one drop, put it into another. And every time you do it, you're supposed to shake it vigorously. Why? Because according to homeopathic understanding, the molecules of the water or the solvent will absorb the memory of the chemical, right? It's going to imprint the memory of the chemical. Then the more you dilute it, according to them, the stronger the medication. Okay. Now, again, to be very simplistic and blunt here, if you believe in homeopathy, frankly, you are having to come forth with a completely alternative understanding of physics, chemistry, biology, and pharmacology. You are literally inventing a new usul of every single science that we know, if you believe homeopathy is effective. And if you look at every single study ever done on homeopathy, you find that it's always equivalent to a placebo. If you know what a placebo is, that's all that it is. It's just a placebo. And if you listen to people who believe in homeopathy, their evidence is always anecdotal. My cousin had a problem and nothing cured him until he took homeopathy. So this is anecdotal. Every single evidence. Fact of the matter is, modern science understands homeopathy to be a figment of imagination in terms of scientific understanding. We're going to come to what is the hukm shari in a while. Another example, all of these are examples quickly as the final one, and I have others in my paper. Another example is chiropractic treatments. And again, this is really relevant to us as fuqaha, because we want to be consistent here. Again, I'm getting to the conclusion, I'm jumping the gun here. If you're going to make one thing haram, be consistent and backtrack and make other things haram as well. That's my point here. So, chiropractic treatments. The founder of the concept of chiropractic treatments is a Canadian by the name of D.D. Palmer, and his views were, again, predominant in his time and place. He believed that there's something called subluxations. And what this means is that there is a misalignment in the vertebra, a misalignment in the spinal cord. And all problems that a person might face was because of a misalignment in the vertebra or in the spinal cord. And he's literally said that I am starting a new ideology understanding like Jesus and like Muhammad. He actually mentioned a prophet by name. He considered himself to be a prophet, but he didn't say prophet. And he admits that this knowledge, doesn't admit, he claims this knowledge was given to him from the other world. This is a knowledge coming from a spiritual entity. And he dies in mysterious circumstances. His son actually killed him, took over the business, and then they're very billionaire people for the time frame. Now, the problem comes that chiropractic treatments involve a number of hard jabs at the spine and pressuring the spine and the neck in an extremely harsh manner. And most scientists are skeptical of chiropractic treatments for anything beyond backaches. And for backaches, even then, they'll say, just be careful, because there have been multiple deaths. There have been tangible harms that have occurred by those that have gone to chiropractics who have basically exerted too much force on the spinal cord, who have turned their neck too right and left, and actually caused permanent damage, sometimes even death. But what is important for us to understand, that the origin of this entire science was somebody who claimed to receive knowledge from the other world, and somebody who called himself a new Moses and Muhammad. And somebody who quite clearly was a semi-mystical quack. He was actually put in jail in Canada for practicing medicine without a license. Okay? Now, all of this is completely forgotten by the modern practitioners of chiropractic treatments. Chiropractic treatments are now mainstream in every city. It is a $50 billion business. People go and the average person who goes is clueless about the origin. Nobody knows that the person pretended to be a type of prophet. Nobody knows that he's saying, I have revelation from up high. This is unknown. And if you ask them why are you going? They're going to say, oh, because, they're going to treat my back and my back is going to cure my body. So the world paradigm that the practitioner is using is disconnected from the origin myth completely. In fact, anybody who goes there, guarantee you, they're going to be surprised to hear that the founder had these quasi-religious claims, disconnected in totality. So, bottom line then, if you are going to claim that a particular paradigm is haram, because, for example, the asl or the efficacy is imaginary, right? If you're going to say, what is this thing called energy? I don't believe it exists. I say valid. Okay. Are you going to say the same about homeopathy, which is frankly a figment of imagination? Are you going to say the same about chiropractic treatments and homeopathy, chiropractic treatments, acupuncture? By and large, the vast majority of modern ulama have allowed it. As I said in my paper, I have the references there. Are you going to be consistent and say all of these are also haram because it is an imaginary causality? If you say, but this is energy and that's physical causality, we say, okay, how about Islamic medicine? How about Ibn Sina? How about the Unani tradition? When Ibn Sina is using concepts that go back to Greek paganism, when Ibn Sina adopts very clearly Greek ideologies and Greek theologies, but by the time it gets to Ibn Sina, there is no theology. By the time Ibn Sina is adopting the pneuma, and he calls it the nafs, by the way, and he brings a pseudo-Islamic because it's nafs and the Quran and whatnot. But if you read Ibn Sina and you read Galen, it's the exact same thing. Simply because you called it the nafs doesn't mean it becomes Islamic. The idea and the functionality of the nafs, according to Ibn Sina, is exactly the same as that of Galen. And Galen and Hippocrates and others, they believe pneuma is something that has to do with the Greek gods and Zeus himself. So, if you want to be consistent in this regard, you have a bit of a problem. And that is, you will have to make haram pretty much almost any default medication. And that's why, in my humble opinion, I conclude with 3 maxims. Maxim number one, it is not the role of the faqih to become a doctor, unless he or she is a doctor. A faqih, an actual faqih, should not get involved in figuring out which medicine is effective and which medicine isn't. That's not my job or your job. We should not judge the efficacies of other medicinal treatments. Now, if you're well-read, if you are, mashallah, bahith, separate from fiqh, and you have a personal opinion, no problem. Tell the brother or sister, in my personal opinion, and this is my personal opinion, homeopathy is a figment of your imagination. That's my opinion. But if you ask me, is homeopathy halal or haram? I will say it's halal. There's nothing to make it haram. You believe there's a causality. You believe that the equivalent, by the way, of homeopathy, if you take a pinch of salt and you add it to the Atlantic Ocean, how the salt will affect the ocean is basically homeopathic medication. That's if the salt is even effective in the first place, i.e., the whole notion of this tincture, of this extract, even being effective against the medication, even that is not proven. But if you believe this is a figment of imagination. Now, does this figment of imagination contradict theology? No, it doesn't. I can say, I believe homeopathy is foolish. That's my opinion. I can say homeopathy doesn't actually cause any effect. That's my opinion. It has nothing to do with shirk and tawheed, has nothing to do with haram and halal. It's irrelevant to the equation. Now you're going to say, but how about chi? Chi is not homeopathy. Maxim number 2. All medicinal treatments that emanate from a paradigm of causal, natural, and mundane correlations are judged by its practitioners are permissible. If the practitioner, if the end user believes that what is happening is causal, it's not mystical, it's not divine, there's no demons, there's no jinn, there's no other deity besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The fact that you don't agree with their paradigm doesn't mean that their paradigm is shirk. Could be wrong, could be foolish. It's not shirk. And the best example for this, well, multiple examples. Chiropractic treatment is one example, right? Chiropractic treatment does believe in some innate intelligence force. It's a modern equivalent of chi. Another example actually is Avicenna Ibn Sina and his notion of pneuma and miasma and all of these. It goes back to the ancient Greeks. And if you read the ancient Greek theologians and their plays and whatnot, their version of pneuma is theological. There have linkages to Zeus and whatnot. By the time it gets to, as I said, Ibn Sina and others, it has disconnected simply because the same term is found by scholars and clerics of one faith traditions and by medicinal practitioners of a similar culture doesn't mean they are causally connected together. This is a key point here. So if Taoist monks use the concept of qi, and if acupuncturists use the concept of qi, it does not make qi in and of itself shirki. It's not shirki because the people who practice it don't view it as being as a divine force or power. They view it as being the way we would view gravity or we would view magnetic waves. If you take an average, like complete Bedouin or complete person disconnected from reality and say, you have cancer, I have to treat it with radiation. You put him under this big machine. It might as well be chi for him. What does he know? He's basically trusting you and that this is an actual energy. Right? The fact of the matter is, once you put a causal relationship that is not mystical, that is not related to theology, then it is up to that person whether he wants to do it or not. And so when will a medicinal treatment be haram? Very clear. A medicinal treatment is haram when it is intrinsically linked to the beliefs or rituals of another religion. And this is demonstrated by a number of things. Of the most obvious demonstrations of this, the people who do it are always from one faith tradition. If a person who does it only is from one faith tradition and they go to those who are generally the priests and clergy of their tradition, well then, we're talking about not medicine, but theology, but rituals. Now, final point. I know my time is up in this regard, but you're going to ask me this question. So, between 2 and 3, listen to me carefully. This is where most of your answers will come. Between 2 and 3, there's going to be a time and a spectrum. It took a while for pneuma to be lost from its theological background and to become nas for Ibn Sina. Do you understand this point? It took actually 1,000 years or 500 years. Now, in this interim, you will have a healthy debate. Some will say, oh, this pneuma, it's linked to the gods. And others will say, what are you talking about? Pneuma is just a concept and they use it, we use it. And both are potentially right. And the best example for this is yoga. The way yoga is practiced in the bulk of Western countries has been completely disconnected from its Hindu origins. The average person who goes is an agnostic atheist, doesn't believe in any God or believes in Christianity or whatever it might be, and they believe you're stretching your bones in this manner, you're getting some better whatnot. Now, the same might not apply in India itself, maybe. The same might, and so if a faqih in California, and we have fuqaha in California, if a faqih in California says that, yeah, of course, yoga is halal, what's the problem? It's a generic thing. And a mufti in Mumbai says it is haram, it's shirki. My point is they both could be right. Each one is looking at their context and their culture. Is that gray area right now? And perhaps the most controversial one is Reiki. And in my humble opinion, Reiki is definitely problematic. But the way that it is practiced in the Western world is not religious. So I will advise this person, if he comes to me, bro, look into this, man. It looks a bit strange to me. And if this person insists, no, it's a generic thing and has nothing to do with religion, well, then from his paradigm, he's actually right. Because Reiki is actually prescribed, or there are centers of Reiki in over 30 hospitals in America, including MD Anderson Cancer Center, which is down the road, 20 minutes away, one of the premier hospitals in the world. They have a Reiki department here. They don't have a Ruqya department, they have a Reiki department. Okay, and this is important. The fact that MD Anderson has taken Tai Chi and Reiki and others as potential alternatives is an indication that it has lost its theological status. Because if it were theological, they don't have a Catholic, healing center. They don't have a Ruqya center, but they do have Tai Chi. They do have acupuncture, one center amongst them. They do have Reiki, and this is a indication that it has lost its religious background, even though fil qalbi minhu shay. But to say shirk or haram is really careful. Bottom line, brothers and sisters, shirk is a big word. Haram is also a big word. We should be very careful when we use these terms. The more we use them excessively, not only are we making what Allah might be considered might be mubah, the haram, but we're also trivializing a term that when we need to use it, like the boy who cried wolf all the time, people are going to say, yeah, you made everything haram. What's left? We have to be careful. Shirk and kufr are big terms. And when you decide or assess when something is shirk and kufr, you need to look at how it is being practiced from the people's perspective, not how foreign it is to you, because you are not the arbiter of something being correct or not. It's the culture that is doing it. So with that point in mind, we open the floor for questions. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Okay, inshallah, we are going to go ahead and open up for Q&A. We're going to be taking questions from the mics only. So if you have a question, please line up. There's a mic here, and then there's a mic there for the sisters. So the way this is going to work, I'm going to take a question from my left here, one question here, one question here, one question for the sisters, and then we'll circle back around, bidnillah. Keep your questions short as possible. I'm going to time you. You have a maximum of 1 minute and 30 seconds. If it goes beyond that, I will cut you off. Our speaker has a limit of about 4 minutes. I want to say 2. I'll give him up to 4 minutes to answer the question, bidnillah. So if you do have questions, please go and line up. And I guess we'll start. Go ahead, bismillah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. It's an honor to hear your lecture, Yasir Qadhi. You're my favorite teacher. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you. Just want to say, as a Muslim, don't Muslims believe that in the punishment of Allah and the reward of Allah? So if a person, they become sick or ill, it's because of a sin that they did, or there's a problem with their nafs. And if a person, if they are obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they're never going to become sick. That's the one question. And the second thing is, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said that some people will enter Jannah without hisab, and those are the people that don't even ask the ruqya. So can you comment on that?
So the issue of sin causing disease or sickness is a separate issue of whether a treatment is haram or halal. And without a doubt, ما أصاب من مصيبة إلا بما كسبت أيديكم ويعفو عن كثير وما أصابكم من مصيبة إلا بما كسبت أيديكم. Every calamity that happens, at some level, we do understand that this is the repercussion of our own actions, and so we use it as an expiation, as a kafara. We don't say that, oh, I am bad, Allah is punishing me. Rather, we say, Allah is giving me the potential to be cleansed of my sins and be a better person. There's a big difference between the two. The first is su'al dhan billah, the second is husnul dhan billah, right? So you are correct in this point, but it has nothing to do with the theological permissibility of a substance. The second issue about hum alladhina la yastarqun, that they don't ask for ruqya. So again, it depends on which group of scholars you ask in this regard. And of course, the mainstream, one of the mainstream Hanbali positions, in fact, the mashhur, even though it depends on who you want to ask which is mashhur, but the Hanbali position actually, as Ibn Qudamah chronicles, is that al-awla tarkuhu. It's better to not ask for medicines. It's better to not go to the doctor and to rely directly on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, that is an antiquated opinion. I would dare say most of the modern Hanbali scholars have taken the other position within its own school, but this is one of their evidences that they used. Number one. Number two, there is another interpretation, which is another mainstream interpretation, which is that these are people who, when it comes to ruqya, they don't go to somebody else to ask for ruqya. They do ruqya on themselves. So the issue is self-reliance. The issue is not seeking treatment of spiritual nature. Because again, the issue comes here, when you go begging for help, right? There's a notion of you demeaning your izzah. And you should ask Allah Azza wa Jalla directly. This is different than paying for your help, by the way. This is like freeloading. So you don't want to go ask for favors. So this is the other interpretation, which actually makes more sense to me, because in the end of the day, if you are paying somebody to help you, or if the country provides free healthcare that's a part of your taxes, it's not free, this hadith would not apply there. because you're not demeaning yourself. You're not begging people. This is your right and haqq to do that. So Allahu Alam, these should not be used to prevent any type of medication. Wallahu ta'ala.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. Go ahead.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh. Jazakumullah khair. Mike, I have two questions. The first one is relating to the point that you made that some of the practices, like yoga practice, the way it's practiced in the Western world, is completely, detached from its original, or the way it was practiced, or it is practiced in India and so on. So therefore, practicing it here will make it okay. In that same lens, I've had some of my students come up to me and say, well, why can't we celebrate Christmas? Because the idea of Christmas, of course, is theological, it's a Christian celebration, but now in the words has nothing to do with Christianity. So can I celebrate it?
Jayyid, second question.
How do you differentiate? The second question is also regarding to medicine and theology. Like, there are some people, as you mentioned right now, like, instead of going to the doctor or going to get professional healthcare, some people go either to visit the qubur of the shuyukh, and they make dua for them to give them shifa and things like that. How would you, or what advice would you give in regards to that, saying that, hey, listen, it's one thing for you to make dua in general for health, and I think I'm asking this question because you mentioned the issue of shirk and saying that people are committing shirk is a big thing.
I need to ask you to go. All right.
Okay.
Bismillah.
So the first issue is not quite related to our topic, but I've given a longer lecture about celebrations. You can listen to that. And the issue comes here, and this is the key point that you're asking is actually relevant to what we're doing here. In my paper, I called it spiritual istihala. If you know this, a pun on the fiqh issue, right? How many degrees of separation does it take for something that was paganism to no longer become paganism, right? How many degrees of separation? Because in the end of the day, there are things that we all do as a modern culture that when they were initiated, they might have had elements of paganism. Some of the most trivial and mundane examples are actually the days of the month and the days of the week. Every single day of the month is actually a dedication to a god. Every single day of the week, the Thursday, Friday, Wednesday, Monday, every day of the month and the week, when the Romans initiated these names, were using the Roman names, they were all Thor. Thursday is the god of Thor. Wednesday, the god of Odin. The god of Odin, which is the Nordic god, that's Wednesday. So if we were to be consistent, according to that opinion, saying Wednesday should be shirk. And I'm just pointing out, again, I want to be consistent here. It's not shirk. Why is it not shirk? It's lost. It's paganism. So in my humble opinion, and I know many great ulama disagree, in my humble opinion, we don't look at the origin. We look at the current state of affairs. Right? Now, as I said, in the middle, there might be a gray area for some issues, but I would say very clearly the way that it is practiced now, without a doubt, Diwali and Christmas and other things are pure religious festivals, and that's why it's a common joke. On 25th of December, you have a bunch of Jews sitting in Chinese restaurants. There's a joke in America. They both don't celebrate 25th of December, so you got the Jewish people going to the Chinese restaurants on the 25th of December. As of yet, the way it's practiced is clearly paganism. The issue comes about dua. So again, this is not quite related to us, but here's the point, is that when you bring in ritual, so when people of one faith do something predominantly, and they do it around sacred symbols of their faith, this is religion. Okay, so if Christians do something unique to Christianity, if they go to the priest and say, give me holy water to cure my cancer, okay, a Buddhist and a Zoroastrian, by and large, are not going to consider this to be holy. So here we are talking about rituals of a religion. In our religion, as you're aware, rituals must be found in the Sharia, otherwise it goes against our Sharia. So in my humble opinion, these are things that we should completely avoid. It is Allah alone who is asked. We do not ask other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and asking other than Allah azza wa jal has the potential of being shirk. Wallahu a'lam.
Jazakumullah khair.
Okay, from this side, please.
Yes, assalamu alaikum. My question would be, do you know why homeopathic medications are actually regulated by the FDA, just like over-the-counter medications, as well as they do need a prescription? For example, a lot of homeopathic cancer medications, opium, pygenum, which is antibiotics. So my question is, if it's so quack, why do we need the FDA to monitor it so strictly, whereas to the point where only a medical doctor can prescribe some of them?
Homeopathic prescriptions do not require a medical license, by the way.
Yes, they do.
Uh, is that
I
correct?
know because I have to get them sometimes through a medical doctor for my cancer patients.
So that means, so I want to ask, I'm not sure, Dr. Hadid, do you know this? Because homeopathic medications require an MD?
Not all of them, but some of them, absolutely yes.
Okay, this
Like
is news to me. 'Cause-
cyclophosphamide, doxorubicin.
So in our own household, my parents are big believers in this tradition, and I'm not. So we've had some nice discussions there.
Right.
So they go to people that are definitely not trained. So the FDA does not decide the for us, the FDA is more about damage control and harm. It's not about the fact they endorse it. So the fact that they're controlling it means that what the substance they want to be sold should not be harmful to the user. So,
Correct.
for example, many centers in this country, hospitals are allied with acupuncture, with Reiki, with Tai Chi. This is their version of saying we accept this as an alternative if you want to. The majority of scientists do not believe these things to be effective. And if you disagree with this opinion, that's fine. Don't bring in theology, is my point. You believe homeopathy is effective, good for you. But there have been thousands of research papers done, so many research papers that there have been meta research done on the research, i.e., research papers that combine and collate hundreds of research papers in this regard. All of them have shown that homeopathic treatment is no better than a placebo. So, but we are not debating homeopathy. I know it raises emotions in people. That's good, no problem. Don't bring in fiqh and aqidah is my point. You believe in homeopathy, good for you. I have no problem. But for somebody to say that an imaginary treatment is shirk, I would say to that person, do you believe about all imaginary treatments to be shirk? In which case you bring in every single treatment that is deemed imaginary by the other paradigm. That's the point to accept.
I appreciate that. And just wanted to make another point that you did share your
Okay,
personal opinion. So
sorry
and
about that. I'm
also,
gonna have
yeah.
sorry.
Vitamins are not FDA regulated, okay? Just FYI.
Okay,
Jazakallah.
all right. So I hate to be the bearer of bad news. That had to be the last question. So my apologies about that. We need to actually move on to the next session. So Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Yasir, for your presentation. And inshallah, we're going to take a quick, we're going to have a video that's shown, and then we're going to have our next speaker to please come up, and we'll start the next session right after the video. Jazakallah khair.